TV character deaths can be some of the most memorable parts of any show, but they also have so much potential to go wrong. And as a result, pissing off fans and pleasing them is a fine line to walk when it comes to this topic, as all of the following show. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 TV character deaths that pissed off fans. Number 10. Glenn Rhee of The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead alone has enough maddening character deaths to fill out an entire list, but I won't go off yet again about how they did my boy Carl dirty. Instead, let's talk about our beloved hero Glenn Rhee getting whacked in the season 7 premiere. Poor Glenn in this episode ended up having his head smashed to a pulp by Negan with his trusty baseball bat Lucille. And as you can probably guess, Glenn didn't die quickly via this method, and the scene left even seasoned gorehounds thoroughly nauseated by the focus on both the extreme grisliness, i.e. Glenn's eyes popping out of his head for one, and Glenn's prolonged suffering. Though Glenn's death was inevitable, given that it also happened in the comics, where Carl didn't die by the way, the unflinching, arguably over-the-top nature of its depiction in the show incited a debate among fans and critics over the acceptability of ultraviolence in storytelling. For a character as beloved and just as damn good as Glenn was, it was painfully ironic that he suffered one of the series' most horrifying and unforgettable deaths to date. Number 9. Jax Teller, Sons of Anarchy. While it wasn't even remotely surprising that Sons of Anarchy ended with the death of protagonist Jax Teller, many felt that the precise method of Jax's demise and its rough technical execution left a lot to be desired. In the show's final moments, having gotten his affairs in order, Jax leads the police on a merry chase on the interstate before riding his motorcycle into a truck committing suicide. And while some appreciated the fact that Jax made things right for Sam Crow before bailing out of existence, and did so in a manner poetically mirroring his father's own death, others felt that the suicide was something of a cop-out ending. But the fanbase's frustration was far more united against how poorly directed Jax's death was, largely due to atrocious visual effects which made it look unintentionally goofy. The terrible composite shot of Jax driving into the truck and the follow-up CGI image of crows feasting on cake rendered a scene that should have been deeply sad and affecting totally laughable. Number 8. Oberyn Martell, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones fans certainly have their fair share of traumatic death scenes to choose from, but not one quite evoked the combination of shock and disgust that Oberyn Martell's grisly end did. In the legendary Season 4 episode The Mountain and the Viper, the ultra-charming, impossibly cool Oberyn partakes in trial by combat against the Mountain to determine the fate of Tyrion Lannister. Though Oberyn gets the better of his adversary and stabs him with a poison-laced spear, his own showboating is ultimately his undoing, giving the Mountain just a moment to trip Oberyn up, gouge out his eyes, and crush his skull, all the while confessing to the rape and murder of Oberyn's sister. Seeing the suave, handsome Viper reduced to a lifeless husk with his brains splattered all over the floor was deeply upsetting, given that no gory detail was spared, and also intensely frustrating, as Oberyn was basically killed by his overconfidence. He was so close. Number 7. Matthew Crawley, Downton Abbey. Fans still haven't forgiven creator Julian Fellows for killing off dapper fave Matthew Crawley, played by the always lovely Dan Stevens. Basically, Dan Stevens' career was beginning to take flight and he decided that he wanted to exit the show. But given that Matthew had gotten Lady Mary pregnant in the story, there wasn't really any plausible reason for him to just suddenly leave. Well, without dying, that is. And so the decision was made to have Matthew perish in a car accident while driving home from the hospital after meeting his son for the first time in brutal soap opera fashion. Matthew's corpse laying underneath his wrecked car is heartbreakingly intercut with footage of Lady Mary cradling their newborn, which, while clearly intended to move fans, simply left many frustrated at how suddenly Matthew died, and how blatantly Fellows tried to manipulate their emotions. Fellows was clearly written into a corner to an extent here, so you can give him credit there, but this bloody car wreck just seemed like one step too far. Number 6. Omar Little, The Wire. Omar Little was one of The Wire's most popular characters, a Robin Hood-like stick-up man who made his living ripping off street-level drug dealers while operating under a strict moral code whereby he refused to harm innocents who weren't part of the game. Now, while it wasn't a shock that Omar didn't make it to the end of the series in one piece, the nature of his demise was a huge surprise, and to many quite the anticlimax. See, in the show's 5th and final season, Omar is killed in a convenience store by Kenneth, a child drug dealer who shoots him in the head. The irony of Omar being gunned down not by one of his notable adversaries but a seemingly harmless small boy was not lost on fans, many of whom found it a disappointing way for the series' most cunning character to go out. Number 5. Lexa the 100. Fans of the CW's The 100 never forgave the writers for killing off fan-favourite warrior leader Lexa midway through the show's 3rd season. Through her relationship with Clark Griffin, Lexa became an icon for the LGBTQ+ community in the show, who were left fuming when Lexa was killed by a stray bullet mere moments after having sex with Clark for the first time. Beyond the fact that the thoroughly badass Lexa died in such a decidedly not badass fashion, many fans accused the show of invoking the infamous bury your gays trope, whereby gay relationships and media have a tendency to be tinged by tragedy and often death. The blowback was vocal enough that creator Jason Rothenberg issued an apology to fans, noting that while Lexa was always going to die, framing her death in such close proximity to her groundbreaking romance with Clark was a mistake. Number 4. Dan Connor Roseanne. It's tough to decide whether Roseanne fans were more pissed off or just downright gobsmacked when Roseanne's hubby Dan was revealed to have died due to his season 8 heart attack. Now, originally, audiences were led to believe that Dan actually survived this scare, with the 9th season focused around the Connors winning the lottery and recovering from this moment. The entire season, though, is coloured with strange subplots and occurrences, including Dan having an affair, until the series finale finally reveals that the entire season was just a piece of fiction written by Roseanne, and that Dan did indeed die from his heart attack the previous year. While some fans were happy that the season's wackier events were undone, it was seemingly at the cost of Dan's life, ensuring the show concluded with one of TV's all-time worst bummer endings. In fact, the ending soured fans so much on the show that when it was finally revived in 2018, the decision was made to just retcon Dan's death and bring him back to the land of the living. Number 3. Curtis Manning 24. Following one of its most acclaimed seasons, Day 6 of 24 is where the wheels truly began to come off on the mega successful thriller series, as evidenced no better by the infuriating demise of Steely's CTU agent, Curtis Manning, in one of the season's first few episodes. This was because since his introduction in Season 4, Curtis's bravery and general badassery seemed to position him as the one true character who could possibly take up Jack Bauer's mantle one day. If Curtis was ever going to be killed off, it absolutely needed to be in the ultra-heroic way that elevated his character. But instead, the decision was made to have him die a totally unexpected and flat-out underwhelming death as he's shot in the neck by Jack himself. Curtis's death was so deflating, in fact, that many fans assumed that he'd return, but alas, he did die for real, and we've all been fuming about it ever since. For all of 24's attempts to present a successor to Jack Bauer, they had the perfect candidate years ago, and then just pointlessly killed him off. Number 2, Dean Winchester, twice Supernatural. Alright, if we're getting technical about it, Dean Winchester has died more than 100 times over the course of Supernatural's 15 seasons, such that some naturally evoked far greater reactions from fans than others. And the first one that rankled a lot of fans occurred in Season 9, when Dean was fatally stabbed by the extremely powerful Angel Metatron. While fans knew by this point not to take death too seriously, in this case it actually had major ramifications for Dean, as the episode ended with him being resurrected as a demon, courtesy of the Mark of Cain. Fans were understandably in an absolute frenzy given the transformation of Dean's character, and also the fact that, as this season's cliffhanger ending, they had to wait months to see how it all panned out. Of course, Dean was eventually cured of his demonic state after 3 bloody episodes, and goes on to die a few more times throughout the series, most notably in the series finale where he gets impaled on a piece of rebar by a vampire and then dies. And given that everything Dean went through during the series, many expressed bemusement that he died such an unimaginative garden variety death that you typically expect to see reserved for less important minor characters. Hell, even actor Jensen Ackles admitted when he first read this, he didn't like it one bit. Sure, the ending still left fans misty-eyed, but many felt that Dean's final death should have been considerably more epic than this. Number 1. The Mother, How I Met Your Mother. Despite all the ire that the previous TV deaths caused, you won't find one more universally loathed than that of the titular mother, Tracy, in How I Met Your Mother's series finale. After 8 seasons of speculation, we finally saw the mother for the first time at the end of season 8, after which she became a main character for the remainder of the series. And it seemed like Ted and Tracy's happy ending was quite literally predestined. But because there's apparently nothing worse for a series finale than to be predictable, at least if you ask the writers of Game of Thrones, the writers instead decided to hurl a misguided last-minute curveball at the fans. So in the series finale, Ted reveals that 6 years prior to the start of the series, Tracy actually died of an unspecified illness, effectively freeing up a newly bachelor Ted to pursue Robin in the present instead. Fans were of course outraged that Tracy was disposed of so flippantly after 2 seasons worth of character development, especially as it felt like such a transparent way to get Ted back together with Robin. The backlash was so severe that an alternate ending was included on the season's DVD release, re-editing scenes and including new narration from Ted that both kept Tracy alive and had Robin never get divorced from Barney in the first place.